Welcome home. We are WNST, Tassel, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are positively into the summer months where, we had a little respite during the All-Star break. I've talked to a lot of rock stars and business people. We're doing a lot of politics as we get up onto the very, very important election. We'll be schooling folks. Our friends at the Maryland Lottery will send us out with the Gold Rush Sevens doublers on the Maryland Crab Cake Tour. I will be at State Fair. I have my State Fair shirt on. And Catonsville, if you don't know how to pronounce it, if you're from out of town, Catonsville, if you do, it'll be great in the 21228. We will have Angela Also Brooks, who is the Prince George's County executive running for Senate on the Democratic side against Larry Hogan. We've invited Governor Hogan also on the program. I don't know when or where that's going to happen, but I do know we'll be doing Angela Also Brooks on the 13th. Also brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions, keeping our water crystal clear, especially in my orange-colored glass these days, as well as Jiffy Lube Multi-Care, putting Luke out on the road, putting us out on the road, and powering us up with our folks at Royal Farms and these wise conversations that we have. Summer in baseball. My last name's Aparicio. I've been at this, the 25 Cupcakes about to become 26 years next week. We've done 33 years now of baseball, strike talk, Cal Ripken talk, Camden Yards talk. Let's steal a football team. Okay, we got a football team. Let's win a championship. Oh my God, the owner's a maniac for the baseball team. Like, all of this stuff has happened here through all of this. And, it's not chronicled as much as maybe it used to be when great sports writers like Buster Olney and Tim Kirkchin and the people that I worked with, John Stedman in the 80s. And there were legendary characters that grew up in Baltimore and went to other places. One of them I'm having a cheesesteak with on Friday named Dick Girardi in Philadelphia, Joe's Steaks in Fishtown, before seeing the great REO Speedwagon in Camden. And people escape even to Philadelphia and do things with their lives. Especially when they have old men that were great sports writers as well. Mark Kram joins me from the city of brotherly love. We love him. We hate him. I had Todd Radom on this week. He's living up in Fishtown. They imported his sports logo them in. I don't know what it is like. Baltimore's one of those places. If you're a Peter Schmuck, you come here. You Scott Garceau, you come, you live, you put down roots, you stay. Mark Kram, tell me what takes a soul out of Baltimore to filthy and plants himself down. But we finally got a baseball team to talk about. Man, how you been, my old friend?
It's just great. It's great to see you again, Nestor. It's been a while. I'll tell you, it's been an exciting summer. It was an exciting summer last year. The Orioles are appointment TV for me. I'm there every night watching them. They're exciting, interesting team, and I love their manager, Brandon Hyde. I really think he not only communicates well with his players, he communicates well with the media. I grew up around, in my journalism career, around Earl Weaver, and this guy is a totally different type.
Well, give me your background. Give us your background. I'm foggy on some of it, no other parts of the legend, not only of you, but of your dad and going to Philly. But I don't know how you escaped. And I'll be really honest. I had Girardi, and man, Dick and I are 40-year friends. And I finally sort of talked, because we're always talking about the Derby this week and the Preakness that week or whatever. I
Right.
bring him on now. We're old farts and we're going to go to the Palestra one day and shoot hoops. And I bring him on. I'm like, how did you get there? What happened? And, a lot of it is sort of the journalism business, that jobs were gone. You had made a name for yourself here. We swam in the same circles. I had Susan Fornoff on a couple of weeks ago. Just sort of old school. And then this old News American Sports First picture resurrected itself after the death of Rich Petro 2 weeks ago. You are in the bloodstream of me and other people and Jack Gibbons and other people, but I don't know how you got where you got and where you got to, because I don't know you nearly as well as I do some other people like Mike Marlowe.
I grew up in Baltimore. My dad started as a columnist for The Sun, a sports columnist, and went on to Sports Illustrated in 1964 and covered boxing, but did many other things.
Your dad was a columnist at the Baltimore Sun when? What period?
59 or to 63.
So he
Or
covered the period before, like, Louis got here, but Brooks was here. Unitas had won. He probably covered the championship or was in on that
yeah, he did
around
his
then.
own. He did sort of an offbeat sports column, so he wasn't really firmly attached to the teams. But anyway, he went to Sports Illustrated, covered the Ali Frazier fights, and went on to write books after that. I grew up in Baltimore, went to the University of Maryland, um, and then dropped out and got a job at the News American. They were hiring young people, and it was a chance for me to get some professional experience. And I spent 4 years there, and then
What
basically you
years of
had to,
those?
what's that?
What years were those?
That was 19 fall of 1978 to early 1983. Now, in those
Oh
days,
man, legendary people came through there. Russ Brown, right?
oh, yeah, he was the sports editor, and in those days they were recruiting talent, papers from around the country, and I had a competing offers from the Denver Post and the Detroit Free Press, and I went out there for a nice pay bump and spent 4 years there. And then, to me, the paper, one of the few papers in the country where you could really let your hair down and write, was the Philadelphia Daily News, and I was able to get as a sports writing, feature writing job at the Daily News, and stayed there for 27 years. That kind of scenario is impossible today. People don't stay in jobs that long, but it speaks to the way that our society is fractured, that you can't plant your feet and have a career, have a family, and basically live a productive life, you know. So anyway, that's sort of the nutshell of what went on. I left the Daily News in 2013, and I wrote. Well, at that time, I had written a book called Like Any Normal Day, which is about a young football player that broke his neck, and his how he spoke. He convinced his brother to help him end his life at the hands of Dr. Kevorkian, of all things. It's pretty dramatic story. And then I did a biography of Joe Frazier. Um,
And you and I have
so
discussed that long form. People can find that at Baltimore Positive about your experience with
right,
Smokey
right,
Joe.
right,
Yeah.
right. And that was well received. And right now I'm, basically watching the Orioles every night. And I guess you could say I'm sort of semi-retired.
Well, I had a lot of things I want to talk to you about, and we'll get to the baseball team, but I do want to hit on the News American and our
Yeah,
similar
sure.
bloodlines and
Right.
sort of, the horses that came from the courses and how we were all taught by Bob Paston for me. And a lot of the same people that, Rich Petro passed away a couple of weeks ago
Oh,
that
did
were
he? Did,
that were in this incredible picture. Rich's son Dominic, I've been friends with Pete forever. He took me out to Bowie. He took me to my first racetrack and taught me
yeah,
literally.
I remember. He
I
took
got
me
taught the
too.
form. I got taught the form at the top of the Pimlico press box by Ekman, Vinny Perone at the post,
Yeah,
Rich Petro, Chris Thomas used to have. I mean, I'm
I
talking like
remember.
like Charlie Lamb, Ross Petticourt, all those guys. Marty
Clem?
McGee, Clem, oh, you baby doll, Clem, of course, Clem was there. Yeah, oh, forget about it. So yeah, so people that
Yeah, well, those days, yeah, those were great days. Uh, for a young person in their first reporting job, what a lot of fun that was. You had all these old timers, who were just unbelievably colorful, and it was very much of. We didn't make any money, but it was a
there was a
great
lot of
environment.
glory, Mark. There really was.
It was a great environment. I really loved and we had some really talent on that News American
Well, I was going to
staff.
say it
I
was an
mean,
incubator for people like you and Bernie Miklasz and Jeff Gordon and John Hawkins and Nestor Aparicio and
right,
on and on and on, right? The people.
and non-sports. It was Mark Bowden who wrote Black Hawk Down. Uh, he went on to the Inquirer and has written numerous books. Just John Farrell, who's been a biographer. He wrote a biography of Nixon, and Clarence Darrow. People have gone on to do some substantial work. So it was they had an eye for talent, and it was a great place to. Jack McCallum, we don't forget Jack McCallum was on the News American Sports staff, covered the Colts, and really, I mean, Gil Breton was another guy who went down to Texas. So we had a lot of talent that passed through there, and it was just
Not to mention competing with Clark Judge and I guess Dan Shaughnessy was here for 5 minutes. Is when every time he comes on, he talks about Weaver in '78 and '79. I mean, that was an incredible Pasquarelli, right?
Pasquarelli, yeah, Peter,
Sure.
yeah, Peter. I mean, it just had a lot of talent that was here. Ron Borges,
Of
who went
course.
on to a substantial career at the Boston Globe. But it feels like a million years ago, given how the media has evolved or devolved, depending upon your view of things. Um, it was a memorable time. That's all I can say. When I walked in the News American, there were they had the old AP machines that were clacking, and they're ringing bells, and stories were coming over to the teletype. And I mean, it was really out of a different, it was right out of the front page. You remember it.
Was Hot Metal Type there still when you were there? Or was just taking?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Well, they
Yeah.
had the
But
composing room, yeah, and you had, I'm in Detroit. When I went to Detroit, you had bookies working in the composing room, and it was just like, all those days have passed away now. It's just, it's sad, you know. Um,
all the
so
good ones like Kerouac and Hunter S. Thompson are gone. That's what
yeah,
left for us.
right.
Mark Kram is here. He's up in Philly, but don't let them fool you. He spent a lifetime up there. And that's why I'm glad that I got your story, because that can bring the full color into your initial comparison of Brandon Hyde to Earl Weaver and your childhood and your old man being a great sports writer and then you becoming one yourself. But there was such institutional knowledge in those rooms of sports writers and in
Oh,
that picture. Just, I
yes,
mean, I saw,
absolutely.
Bob Clark in the back, and I'm like, oh my God, these are people just forgot more about sports than any, and that's where my DNA and people like you and I, where I can take a deep dive on how you're feeling about the team, not from a fanboy perspective, but from a, hey, Mark, I got a gig for you. It's become the columnist for Baltimore Positive, come and write a column 3 days a week and go cover the team every day. There would be real criticism, real analysis because of your background. That's just impossible on Barstool Sports. It's impossible in the modern era, but it's something that I crave, real analysis. And it's something that I really try
Yeah,
to
yeah, so
give
do I.
on a trading deadline week. I want people that know all the aspects of the money, the finances, what these young prospects represent to an organization financially, especially a challenged one like the Orioles that's going to probably continue to stay challenged given the new media and all that. So for me, my first thing with the Orioles this week, and I'll bring you to adult school on this. Mark Kram is here, by the way, from Philadelphia. All of this week that Elias is doing and everything that Rubenstein can and will and must do to grow the team is about getting you to get your 13 game plan back, start spending money with the team, getting businesses to buy in. And you have seen this in Philadelphia, where that thing was a toilet 20 years ago. They built the stadium, they started to win, and now they have this modern thing that's even better than what they had at the Vet 40 years ago when they had Pete Rose and like
Oh,
doing all
sure.
that. They have a thing there that's institutional. I was up in Wayne, Pennsylvania for a Tommy Conwell show. Everybody's got Phillies gear on. It's become a Phillies town until it's an Eagles town, but you've seen it blossom and you love the Orioles and I love the Orioles. There's a lot of growth potential here.
Right, there is, but there's another side to that argument, and that is the ticket prices are just I looked into getting some tickets to an upcoming Phillies series. I was astonished. They're almost the cost as much as an Eagles ticket now for a single baseball game. I mean, the dynamic pricing that they're doing now. I understand that they have to squeeze every dime out of their product that they can, but the stadiums are full, so they are obviously successful and succeeding with this, but I just am astonished that people can afford these prices for ball games. It just seems to go up. Uh, it's astronomical,
Well, it's an expensive ticket in Philly, and that's why
Yeah,
all the Philly people came down here when we had Fleet Week a couple of weeks ago. Really took. I mean, I did my show at Cooper's, and it was all Phillies fans in there on that
yeah,
Friday.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And these were people spending real money. And I talked to Todd Raden about this week. He's up in Philly. These are people. These were grown ups coming down. They were drinking. They were leaving money behind, and they were really
Oh,
enjoying being in Baltimore. These Philadelphia people.
oh,
And I'm
yeah.
thinking
It's
these are people that have fallen in love with baseball. And I saw that happen here with the football team, where it was the flavor of the month and everybody wanted to travel and everybody wanted to go. Baseball's got a chance to be that again here, and it needs to be that. In a town that
well,
has a lacrosse problem, has a football problem, has a Forbes, not a Forbes, top 500 businesses in America. We don't have that. We don't have that sort of affluence here that I saw out in Wayne, Pennsylvania. I saw
well,
there's more money in Philly than there is here.
they've got to in Baltimore. They have to support the team that way because they got some dynamic young talent that they're going to have to pay for at some point soon, and to keep them in town. I mean, they'd be crazy if they ever let Gunnar Henderson sign a contract with anybody else than the Orioles. I mean, they shouldn't let him, out of their sight. And Rutschman too. These are two generational type players, in my view. Now they got some other problems that they got to address, and I think they're aware of it. They're at the moment they're fraying at the edges. It seems they had that run in June that just what was it, 40 straight games or something. I think they blew some tires during that
And they
stretch,
lost three pitchers.
and they lost three pitchers, and they just don't have enough pitching to hold this thing together. And the other thing too is they got some position players and that need some work. Cowser, after that fabulous start he had, has been a flop. He strikes out way too much. So they're in an interesting position. I don't know that they're going to get a frontline pitcher that the Tigers pitcher or some of the other. I don't think they're going to cash in Holiday at this point. I think they'd be crazy to. But
Or Mayo or Basayo, right?
yeah, yeah, I wouldn't cash in Mayo. In fact, I'd get Mayo up here to play. I don't know what they're holding back on him for. I
Well, and
mean,
this is where this week could mean Mountcastle or Hayes or Mullins, that they deal other players out to try to make room for Kerstad, for Cowser, if they believe in him, or deal him out, or Stowers. I mean, they have an outfield problem and they have a pitching problem, and
yeah,
that is, Mark, I mean, I've been waiting 33 years to have the problem of they're going to make the playoffs. Let's just see how good they can be when they get there.
yeah,
Because I
right.
mean, I've been on the air 33 Julys, and it ain't ever happened. I promise you that. And that speaks to the wild card and all of that. But this is such a pivotal week at the trading deadline to do or not do, or not do. Like
Well,
they
I
didn't
wouldn't
do
trade.
last year on Cease, right? And wind up getting Burns, right? But
Yeah,
Burns isn't going to be here next year unless they pay him a fortune, and I don't think they will, and I don't know if they
no,
should. But they
no.
better figure out who their opening day starter is going to be next year.
Well, absolutely. And I've heard Mountcastle's name mentioned in trades. I wouldn't trade Mountcastle. I wouldn't move him. He's a very reliable hitter, very tough hitter. They got some real good bats in the lineup, but they got some real holes as well. I mean, as I say, Cowser, Mullins has been off form this year. You're not going to get anything for Cowser and Mullins, so they're going to have to to move some of their perhaps second tier prospects. I mean, they got a farm system that's loaded. So, but interestingly, the pitching is just not. I'll make a bet. I think they might be able to get Scherzer from Texas. I think they might be able to put a deal for Scherzer, but they're not going to get the guy from Detroit or any of the other frontline pitchers they talked about. The price would just be too high.
Well, and the price on young talent, as we've learned here on the football side when we played with Lamar on the cheap and Joe after you speaking of Philadelphia, the pride of
Yeah,
the other side of Jersey over in Audubon, but there's playing cheap and then there's playing expensive, and Ravens fans are going to find that out with Lamar now and trying to circle the talent and how do you pay Kyle Hamilton? How do you pay these other players?
right.
Baseball, no salary cap, but a real cap on how much money there is, and a new owner who's filthy wealthy and wants to win, but we're going to find out. But from Elias's standpoint, to say, look, man, we're going to have to pay Henderson $40 million 4 years from now. We have to have some Jackson Holidays and some Kobe Mayos make it and play on the cheap the way Westberg and Henderson and Rutschman are right now. And I think they're also at a point right now trying to figure out their revenue. All of baseball is trying to figure out its revenue with this
Right.
crazy. I mean, you're in a weird spot, dude. You're in Philadelphia where things are just rosy and great. One of 8 spots that like the thing's really booming. And then there's 10 spots trying to figure it out. And then we're playing games in Miami this week. And it's like they've never figured it out. Even when they win, they never,
Yeah.
so they have a thing they can figure out here in Baltimore. And I'm sensing this energy for the team, but I'm not sensing new fans or people going down there and
Yeah.
laying a lot of money
You
out.
remember, Nestor, I remember when I was a kid, I went to Coward Hall High School and
I've heard of it.
Loyola. Yeah, I was Loyola Coward Hall. And I used to go to the games. You look back at the baseball retro seat and look how many people attended those games. You'd have Jim Palmer pitching against, I don't know, Vida Blue, and there would be 5,000 people in the seats. It's incredible. If
Well,
you
and
look at
then
some of
then
these,
as a kid, as a 9-year-old, I wonder why Reggie didn't sign here, and why is Don Baylor playing there, and what happened to the Senseis, and like all the Angels sign guys. Why can't we? Well, I didn't really realize this till I wrote about it in the '90s, and this is an admission to Jack Gibbons, who once looked at me like this when I sat in the office and I said, Jack, nobody cares about the business of sports. They care about the players. 19-year-old Nestor, 19-year-old Nestor in Jack Gibbons' office at, on the 5th floor. And he looked at me with, but that taught me that all of this is the business. And that's what
oh,
led Bobby Grich out of town. It's why my cousin never stuck in Chicago, or it was always about money and bitching about money when you're a little Latin player and you're selling tickets and you can't get paid and there's a reserve clause. You had to be chippy like Steve Carlton was and with Augie Bush to get sent to Philadelphia, which was hell. So like that's old
yeah,
school baseball. New school baseball is Scott Boras just waiting around to cash this thing in for 2 of the clients he has on the team here, and fans clamoring like, you got to sign him, Mr. Rubenstein. You're not signing
Nestor,
anybody.
I got to tell you a funny story. You might be aware of it. You might not. I just happened to cross this looking at some looking on the baseball retro sheet. In 1965, I think it was, when the draft, the Orioles had, I think, the 33rd pick, and the Reds had the 34th pick. And the Orioles picked with the 33rd pick, I think it was, they picked a catcher from Dartmouth and a college player. And with the next pick, the Reds picked a high school player out of Oklahoma named Johnny Bench. So they missed out on Johnny Bench, right? Possibly because they wanted a guy who had some college experience and would be closer to the big leagues. But it kind of says, well, if you're willing to go take a gamble with a high school player, who knows what they could be. Can you imagine what that team would have been with Johnny Bench catching on those Oriole teams in 69, 70, 71? They might have won 5 or 6 pennants more. I mean, it would have been incredible.
I
Did you
had
know
Lee
that story?
Cluck on. I had Lee Cluck on, and you can go
Yeah,
check this out as well. He just wrote a book on Harry Dalton,
yeah,
and that would be, you're always famous for your hits. You never remembers the misses, right?
yeah.
When you get a star player, but this Oriole run is uncanny, right? And these guys that came from
Oh,
that Astros system and the Cardinals system and the analytics side and Sig Mejdal and what's happening for a dude like you, Mark, to write a book on this, to write the Astro Ball, the modern Oriole Ball, as to how all of this happened, how John Angelos unearthed Mike Elias during a dinner with Eric DaCosta, by the way. Eric
Uh,
DaCosta was friends with Mike Elias through analytics and recommended to John Angelos that the Orioles, that if they were going to do something, they should look at this guy down in Houston. And
yeah.
what makes Elias and Mydell special in this department of identifying talent? Fine, you can identify talent. Sid Thrift once told me he discovered Barry Bonds. Um, but but then we say nurturing it, training it, teaching it. Marvin Lewis once told me we teach football players. We're not coaches. That's all bourgeois. We're teachers. We give them quizzes and they answer the quiz on Sunday when they show up and do what they're supposed to do.
uh,
Baseball was so Don Zimmer and Truman Cut and Jim Fregosi in your era, and even Buck Showalter throws back to all of that. And then I would sit with Tony Gwynn out in San Diego, and he had a little video machine analyzing everything. What the Orioles are doing to take players and make them better is
yeah.
is an incredible story. It really is.
Yeah. And they got, as I said earlier, I think they got a great manager. You know, he's got a lot more bandwidth than Weaver had. What I mean by that is Weaver was entertaining. He was instinctual. He was a great manager in his way. And he has the record to prove it. But Hyde just handles things with such a sure hand, you know. He's just, I can't tell you how impressed I am with the guy. And Elias as well. I mean, they're really a sharp organization. I'm really glad that they're doing well in Baltimore. One beef I do have with the way baseball is being presented on television is this business of miking players during the game itself. I never thought I'd live to see the day that they would do that. I remember a few weeks ago when they had a mic on Gunnar Henderson on a Sunday night game. I mean, they were asking him questions like, which of your teammates would you like to be stranded with on a desert island while he's trying to play the game? While the pitch is, I mean, he's trying to concentrate on the game. You know, I think that it gives me the feeling that baseball will sell any piece of itself for a few extra bucks. You know, they went into gambling in a way that I thought was distasteful and troublesome, and as all sports are. And
Everybody
now,
around
you know,
Ohtani would
everything's for
agree with
sale.
you
They've
on
got
that,
the,
by the way. Didn't take long, did it,
yeah,
Mark?
and they've got these T-Row Price patches on their shoulders. I mean, they look like NASCAR drivers these days. I mean, you know, since I grew up with the game and was very fond of it. I mean, you had none of that stuff. But I guess the economic pressure these teams are under must be just immense.
Well, if T. Rowe Price is giving him $10, $15 million, that doesn't even buy a middle infielder. That
That's
doesn't
right.
even it doesn't even buy a number two starter. Like
Yeah.
it's just an amazing amount of money that's flowing around because of football at this point and all of sports and media. While these regional sports networks, I mean, is Masson an asset? It's not an asset. It feels like a ball and chain. And Angelo the family squeezed all the money out of this. And now Mr. Rubenstein's coming in here and he's finding this cupboard full of great baseball players that one day they'll have to pay, and this broken media model and this marketplace that, quite frankly, Mark, as a media member that's been exiled for 18 years and has been told to shut up by the new ownership and locked out while my Caucasian employee has a media pass this weekend and has to cover two teams. So I have a media beef as a grown-up about all of this, but
Yeah.
there is a point for Mr. Rubenstein coming in here that there'll be no tough questions in the early days, but I want you to put your columnist hat on and be a hard ass about things and really take a realistic view of how does this thing. They might steal a championship this year, next year. They might win a couple of times because they're that good right now. But if they have to
Right.
start paying players and they have to start filling up skyboxes and they have to stop giving away $60 all you can come for a month packages and have what Philadelphia has, which is enough
Right.
money to pay Bryce Harper, in a lot of
Right.
ways, right? But they had the Angelos family torched the reputation of the brand here while the Ravens came in and stole everything. And now
Right.
Katie Griggs is coming in from the Mariners on one of those internal hires, and they're bringing her in to fix. She's a fixer. She's going to fix this place. They're going to get an All-Star game here. They might win a couple of World Series. I do wonder, Mr. Rubenstein. Nobody's interviewed him. Nobody can find him, giving out hats, dancing on the dugout. Then he does a sit down, and I implore you as a political man, and I follow you on Facebook, so now I know who you're not
Yeah.
voting for this year, which good for you.
Right.
But go watch his act on MSNBC a couple weeks ago,
Right.
CNBC Squawk Box. He
Yeah.
was on Squawk Box for 8.5 minutes where he befriends both the president and the former president, the insurrectionist, the liar.
Yeah.
He's friends with
Yeah.
both of them, and he's down. He used to be a Democrat, but he's not anymore. But he doesn't do anything with politics. He tells the host, "No, I have nothing to do with politics, although I'm friends with the like all." And then he says he bought the baseball team. So this is holding them accountable. This owner is in a honeymoon period, and he'll never be interviewed, never be heard from other than by his employees. No different than Angelo's. And then he says on Squawk Box, he's like, well, no one's ever lost money buying a baseball team. It's a great investment. This is his pitch to get more people to give him money to invest in it, which is why he was taking Cal Ripken around a couple weeks ago. And then he says, but I did this to be philanthropic. I mean, this is because I'm a great guy and I'm a philanthropist. But of course, we're here to make money. He said all of that in a sentence. And this is a guy that's never going to sit and be interviewed by me or you or any legitimate journalist. And he's handled. He's a billionaire. At some point, tough questions come, Mark. You're a columnist. Your dad
Remember,
was the tough questions are going to come because it's not going to just be as easy as stealing a championship. And the trade this week's going to be controversial one way or another because that's baseball. That's the way we talk about baseball.
I will say one thing about this, and you can read into it what you want. Remember, Nestor, he is a creature of the hedge fund world, and that should tell you something. You know, if you do a little reading into that whole how the hedge funds have a stranglehold on America and in sports, the owner of the Commanders is a hedge fund. He owns the Sixers as well. These guys,
they don't have any
they're
spirit
not
of
in
community.
not in it
right.
for spirit of community.
Not for the same reasons Mr. Hoffberger was fighting to try to figure out how to get $1 million to give to Reggie Jackson.
Right. So I think that in the enthusiasm that they have about the new ownership, I think that this part of it's being overlooked. And I think what you're saying is the media, a more robust media would be looking at all of this aspect of his background.
Well, the more robust media would have chased John Angelos ragged.
Right.
All those names we mentioned 40 years ago would have chased John Angelos, especially after he shat upon Dan Connolly and pointed at him and demeaned him and all of us by we can't possibly know anything, but he's going to open his books. And I mean, dude, we're 9 months away from Governor Moore standing there doing the Papa wave that they had a deal that they didn't have. Like, there's been so much bullshit going on that the dancing on the dugout and giving out hats and squirting the fans with Joan Jett and winning, quite frankly, winning has fumigated all of the Angelos thing, except the part where they get your money. And people have to go back and literally, like Big Poppy with the hose, be willing to buy $15 beers and $80 tickets and the Orange Club and be down there 20 or 30 times a year and be able to afford it, or have businesses that can afford it. There's a lot of questions here that are legitimate after the Angelos debacle, despite the fact that it's great, because it's great right now. But if this guy's going to cash out 5 years from now and get an all-star game and get a $600 million from the people into the stadium and then blow it out for 3.5 trillion or billion or whatever it will be a couple of years from now, he's 74 years old. He's not moving to Baltimore like Tom Benson and running around with an umbrella and saving the city. I don't sense that at all. I sense that this is an ego baseball play and nothing more, nothing as a columnist. And that's okay. I mean, he's already made the place better just by being here. It can't be worse.
Jeez, isn't it? Baseball is still the greatest sport to me between the white lines. Everything outside the white lines has, to me, it's very difficult to uh, countenance some of it, a good bit of it, particularly the gambling part of it. I really find that to be how baseball and all sports have embraced gambling after being so vociferously opposed to it for so long.
And with good
Uh,
reason.
and with good reason, of course. I mean, this is ruinous to families. So you're taking money out of one pocket for the high cost of attending a game and participating in the game that way, and you're going to take money out of their other pocket that they use for groceries and keeping their families going, and putting the one of the most addictive things imaginable in front of them, tying in the dopamine hit that you get from gambling into the motif of the game. It's really, really bad. It's a terrible situation in my view.
And listen, I work with Hollywood Casino. People bet. I've talked about it. I tell people to do it responsibly. No one around here ever bet on baseball. This was not as much as this was a baseball town. I did sports radio 30 years. I worked at the paper. You mentioned guys gambling at the paper in the composing room or whatever. Nobody ever gambled on baseball here, right?
No.
So, but now it's $5 on Mountcastle to home run tonight at 10-1 or whatever. Like that's almost like in the outfield, you and me and 9 friends taking a player for $1 in a pool and play. And I hear all of that, but the problem I have fundamentally about this, where I put my columnist hat on, where John
Right.
Stedman channels through me and
Yeah.
Ekman channels through me, who refereed these games and bet on them, right? Would be this Ohtani situation, compromising players. Part of it, Pete Rose thing was bad guys were chasing him, and Michael Jordan had a gambling addiction that always led to the rumors if he owed the wrong people the wrong kind of money, and how would that go down? But more than that, there is the point where if Mark and Nestor got together and decided to create a game and say we're gonna open it up for people to gamble on it, we're gonna control the dice, the dealers, the rules, the outcome. Literally, they
Yes. Yes.
adjudicate the outcome of the bets. That is a real problem in forget baseball, hockey, but any sport, black, white, Mars, Earth, Venus, the solar system, wherever you want. In that world, the government has really lost its mind to allow a modern day craps game that's adjudicated. I mean, I pimped the lottery and John Martin comes on. The difference is John Martin doesn't pick the winners, and no one there,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like literally no one there is refereeing what's a ball and a strike or a catch or not a catch or a foul or not a foul that moves games. And that's the part that blows my mind, is that anybody else would go to government and the internet and say, we're going to open up this game, that we're going to make all the rules and we're going to decide who wins and loses. That's insane. That's an insane proposition. It really is.
Well, yeah, it's like it's monetizing every aspect of it. I mean, it's gotten absurd now, even with baseball cards. People spending thousands, untold thousands of dollars for baseball cards, as if they're pieces of art, and memorabilia. It seems like every aspect of sports has a price tag on it. And that, to me, that detracts from kind of the what's the word? The
Attractiveness, maybe?
attractiveness of just the simplicity of the games. I mean, the games were not meant to be an engine for this economic, growth. I don't think. It's but what can I tell you? It's end
You still
stage
love it, right?
capitalism.
You still love it, though.
Oh, between the lines, I love the game. I love it. It's one of the great games. Outside of the lines, it's just there's a lot of aspects, as I've just discussed, that leave me very cold about the game.
Yeah, well,
About
Mark Kram is our guest. I want to reintroduce you for our audience if they just came in on the radio. Mark's a longtime sports writer, author in Philadelphia, but a Baltimore guy. So your love of the Orioles every day is through the TV screen. You come down. Sometimes I see you with kids, family, friends. You used to come down to games
right,
once in a while. You had a
right.
13-game plan. I think maybe it
I
feels like
did, yes,
you
I
had it
did.
during the really bad years. I would ask you, what the
Yeah,
hell are you doing down here watching,
I know.
Rio
Well, I like
Ruiz
some of
play third base and.
Yeah, yeah, it was not a good year. I mean, they'd be out of the game. I remember Wade Miley walked 12 batters in a game, and I just it was furious watching these guys. So I bought the tickets in the wrong season. So, um,
But what's your
but
engagement now? You watch him every single night, which is why I brought you on. I mean,
yeah, I
you can
do, I
discuss the
do.
Orioles with incredible
My
fluency.
wife and I, my wife
Yeah,
and I watch it every night. Yeah, it's just that we talk about it over breakfast. What are they going to do? It's a source of great conversation with us. So
I
it's
love
really
that you still love it, like in that
yeah,
way, because it's harder for me given the discrimination that's been shown in my
right, right,
direction
right.
in regard to whether I'm a real journalist or not. I am. But for you, and I see your Ali Frazier thing over your shoulder. And Cosell had his Tex Cobb moment famously and saying this isn't good. I'm getting to that point with football, with head trauma, and having been
Oh
around it a
yeah,
lot and seeing people I knew and liked a lot have happened. What John Mackey happened here, and other players that are in the struggle that played for the Ravens many years ago or have left us tragically. We lost Jacoby Jones last week at the age of 40. So I'm seeing this as a 55-year-old guy in a different way. But I do see the romance of Gunnar Henderson singing Scooby songs and Adley Rutschman being a leader. And even though I'm locked out of it, I enjoy watching Ben McDonald call the games. It's a great job. And I know Ben well. So all of the removal of me probably makes me a better columnist. But there was a point where their um pettiness, and more than that, their just lack of integrity to answer hard questions and answer legitimate fan media business. You took $600 million. So I have some staleness for all of it. But there is a point where I think of you with Frazier and thinking like we romance these boxers, and you
oh yeah,
saw and we romance these football players that got hit in the head, right? And
yeah.
I had the great Jerry Eisenberg on.
Oh, did you?
I called him the greatest living sports writer.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
One of Ali's, and you were one of Frazier's insiders. So
yeah.
was your dad. And he said to me when he took a job back in the '60s, you know how Jerry is. He said, my boss told me don't got him up.
Don't got him up.
Don't got them up. Because I've been
Yeah.
asking people like you, what makes a great columnist? What makes a great, and I think I'm trying to be that. I aspire at 55 to channel all of you and all the great men that I've mentioned and women that I've mentioned. Molly Dunham, let me throw her in there. She's my boss too. Another great writer, great person. And channel that to cover this Rubenstein and this Lamar Jackson era when you're being locked out and you can't ask the coach questions that he'd lie to you about if he could. So I'm trying to figure out the new way to cover this without being cynical or jaded, but being really realistic about what Baltimore is, what the economics of all of this are, and what their lack of transparency from what we used to chase
Right.
down
Well,
when guys are getting hit in the head and dying. I guess there's really a humanity point of this that's been lost in sports, I think, in a big way.
it has been. I mean, back in the day, you had all the big papers had 2 and 3 columnists that would really be all over be all over the subjects you're talking about, and really held the teams and not just the teams in sports, but politicians and what have you, held them accountable for their actions and what have you. Now we've kind of migrated to this place where uh, the players make so much money, the owners make so much money that they can afford to be exclusive or and just uh, keep the media at bay. You almost get the feeling that the media is kind of really hamstrung. They got to watch what they say, when they can see the players,
Or they'll throw
that
you
kind of
out.
thing.
Or they'll throw you
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I even had it towards the end of my career. I came down to Baltimore once, and I was going to do a kind of a major piece on Jimmy Key. Remember Jimmy Key, the pitcher? I
Sure.
mean, not a Hall of Famer, just a really good pitcher. And he said to me, "How much time do you need?" I said, whenever I get that question, I say, "Well, you better keep it low and I hope you can get more." I said, "Oh, I don't know, 10 minutes." And that was ridiculous. I needed more than that. And he said, "Oh, 10 minutes, that's a lot of time." You know, that's where they feel like they could, and back in the day, they would sit with you, and
Yeah,
talk
Greg
to you.
Olson would sit on the couch with me for an hour and a half in the middle of that clubhouse and tell me his story. And, if you wanted to hear Jimmy Key's story from Clemson to Toronto, and, like you just want to tell their story, and they're not
Right.
interested in having their story told. And,
No, because they don't need you. They don't
yeah,
need you. They don't need, they're in this such a bubble that, I remember back in the 90s, I went up to Cal Ripken for a piece. I actually traveled to Minnesota to see him. And the first thing that words out of his mouth were, "What's your angle?" I mean, what is he, my editor? You know? I mean, I'll tell you what, the fans just don't know the other side of these players. Many of these heroes that they have. You mentioned Tony Gwynn. He was a rare exception, in my view. I mean, the guy was just a wonderful, wonderful ambassador for baseball and a great, great player, a great hitter.
Mark, there's one jersey. I pulled all my jerseys out for Radim the other day, and I put
Right.
them away because it's the wrong time of the season, and I'm not wearing my polyester Oriole jersey, and I'm not going down there anytime soon. But the jersey that literally is out facing in my closet is Tony Gwynn in the 19
Yeah, he was a great
and
player.
that's the jersey. That's my favorite jersey.
I mean, yeah, it's like, in basketball, Magic Johnson, he was a guy that always got it. I went out to LA for when I was in Detroit to do an interview with Magic Johnson, and I ended up spending 3 days with him. You know, he just sort of let me tag along to wherever he went and was at his house and this and that. I mean, these are rare exceptions, but they understand why the media is there.
Well, there's a point of just knowing how to treat people, like your mother told you, right? There's a
Right,
you can say no and be polite. You can say, there's a that I've been rejected plenty of times happily. But
right.
there is an arrogance. You said exclusivity. I'm going to call it arrogance.
Arrogance,
That
yeah.
is and that all that being said, all that baked in, I don't punish Adley Rutschman or Jordan Westberg or any of these guys in that circumstance, but that is the culture that's been created. You often talk about Chad Steele with the Ravens, and from the minute they get there, but it's way in football. This starts with their high school coach, and then they're special, and then Nick Saban tells them we're rat poison, and then their agent gets a whole. Like by the time they get here these days, 30 years into this Ravens thing, it's a different world, and I would say that to anybody. And it's a world,
Well,
quite
these
frankly,
guys,
as a 55-year-old, I don't want to be in anymore. I'd rather be talking to potential Senator Angela Alsobrooks about making the community better. And the
oh, sure.
baseball team, to me, used to stand for those things locally. And when Rubenstein bought the team, I thought it would be more of a, I was hoping it was more of a local. I mean, Bisciotti was a local play until he moved to Florida and is never
Right,
around anymore. And that's just an unfortunate part of sports and billionaires and
right,
who buy, to your point, the hedge fund managers that buy these teams now, Mark.
right. Well, this Oriole group seems like a pretty good bunch of guys. I don't know. I don't have any firsthand experience. But
Well, I'd like to
they
have my
see.
press credential back so I could find that out for myself.
Yeah. Well, that's ridiculous what they've done to you. That's ridiculous.
Well, that's not
Uh,
neither here nor there. For the team itself, Mark Kram Jr. is our guest from Philadelphia. For the team and for the trading deadline, do you find this week to be that important? Because when I talk to Luke, looks like if they win the World Series, it's going to be because of the guys they got, not because of the guy they're going to get or the guys they're going to get. They need bullpen help. They need starting help. As a fan, what's your expectation this week? You already said you don't expect them to get Scooble.
no, I don't think they'll get Stubble. The Tigers would be actually crazy to let him go. They got a control over him for 2 more years. Uh, I uh, I think that they're taking a shot with this Chance McDermott tonight. They've got Cade Povich down in the minor leagues. I expect both of them to be in Baltimore in September. I think they're going to have to patch things up as they go along. I mean, they have an unfortunate situation where, I mean, these pitchers, this is kind of an aside, but these pitchers are breaking down more than racehorses these days. It's astonishing. I think the sport has to look at itself, really. Every major pitcher that you can think of has had Tommy John surgery,
Spin
including
rate,
Stubble.
max effort, and risk doing things they shouldn't do.
That's right. But that to me is uh, they're not doing right by these pitchers, these young men that come into the game. The pitching is not being taught properly, in my view. And you're marketing this 100-mile-an-hour fastball the same way that they marketed the home run back in the late 90s, the steroid-fueled home run races. This 100-mile-an-hour fastball is to the detriment of the players' arms. They're losing pitchers. There's no reason the Orioles should have 3 pitchers down at this point with Tommy John.
4. Take Batista, throw him in there. Yeah.
Batista and it's Bradish and Means, and who's the other one?
Wells,
of course, Wells. I mean, that's absurd. I mean, I think baseball has to take a real hard look at itself. I mean, you had pitchers, workhorses in the 60s and 70s, guys that would pitch 300 innings and would do it year after year. I keep waiting for Jim Palmer to really address this situation. I mean, he alludes to it, but I mean, that guy.
I've never interviewed Jim Palmer, but he's never been allowed to speak to me and then decided not to. So, to your point, this is the stuff I would talk to Jim Palmer about. This is what I want to hear Jim Palmer talk about.
That's right. I mean, the idea is the guy was a workhorse, and he had arm trouble early in his career. He had problems.
And he saw the Dalkowskis and the other guys go to the wayside, right?
Sure.
He saw guys drink themselves out of the big leagues, hurt themselves out of the big leagues, not take care of their body. And, he's trying to mount that comeback back in '88 for crying out loud. He
was like a guy that had, he had 8 20-game seasons, 3 Cy Young Awards.
He's the greatest Oriole of all time. Like I've said that. All respect to Brooks and Cal and anybody you want, but there's nobody that's ever been better than Jim Palmer.
What he had 50 or 60 shutouts, something like that.
When you look at the back of his baseball card, it's absurd. Even when you put it next to Koufax or Gibson or Seaver or any of the rest of them. Mark, I got to wrap things up with you. I hate saying that because I got a window here and I got other phenomenal guests like Mark Kram Jr. joining us here, formerly the Philadelphia Daily News. One day I'm just going to have you and we're just going to talk old newspaper crap because that's what I love talking about. And you can tell me some old Phil Jasner stories and we can talk about a young Stephen A. And you can do all of that Philadelphia stuff with me. We can even compare best of cheesesteaks and pretzels like I do with Girardi. But come by more often. Let's talk a little bit more baseball. I love having you on. I love the wisdom that you bring. And we'll pimp your book, of course. Anybody out there that wants to learn more about the Frazier Ali thing from a fascinating perspective, your book certainly portrayed you're a hell of a writer, man, and just really
Thanks, man.
took a deep dive into what you saw in front of you in Philadelphia, right?
Well, look, say hi to Dick when you see him Friday.
Maybe I'll have you join us for some cheesesteaks over there with Tom Rainham before that Train concert over in Camden. Mark Kram Jr., defending champion, and his dad was as well here in Baltimore, and a columnist, and I'm trying to be a columnist at BaltimorePositive.com. Stay with us.
All right.